Im-sol was a cripple dealing with severe depression. Regardless of her mom's effort to cheer her up, she shows no sign of hope. She even attempts to commit suicide with a broken glass, but is interrupted by a phone call from a radio station. A K-pop group named Eclipse were guests on the station and played a game where they called random numbers for an interview. When the host mentions gifting a pair of shoes to Im-sol, she gets triggered and lashes out at the host for being inconsiderate to disabled people. As she throws the phone and calls for her mother, Sun Jae, a member of the K-pop group, begins to reassure her of hope. His words hit a spot in Sol's heart, and she breaks down in tears in the arms of her mother. Sun Jae's words pull Sol out of depression, and she becomes a huge fan of his group, supporting him by buying all his merch and even spending millions to buy a watch he had worn. On a fateful day, she prepares to attend his concert and is driven to the venue by her friend. On the way, her friend gives her a high school yearbook with a picture of Sun Jae. And Im-sol realizes that she had lived in the same neighborhood as Sun Jae while in high school. She arrives at the venue and meets up with a fellow fangirl. As they chit-chat and take pictures, Im-sol receives a call from a company she had applied to. They ask her to show up immediately for an interview, so she leaves the concert venue in hopes of returning before the concert starts. But she gets rejected before an interview after they discover she was a cripple. Im-sol is undisturbed by this and immediately rushes back to the venue. But she gets stuck in traffic and arrived to the venue after entry had closed. A kind-hearted staff tries to let her in, but Im-sol had lost her tickets while rushing to board a bus. Regardless of the series of unfortunate events, Im-sol continues to put on a wide smile and participates in singing along from outside the venue. After the concert, Im-sol heads home in a satisfied smile. As she reminisces about the concert, a stranger knocks down her phone, leaving it with a crack. As she also tries to cross a bridge, the battery on her wheelchair shuts down, leaving her stranded on the bridge. Meanwhile, Sun Jae had gotten into an argument with his bandmate after he expressed intention to retire. He suffers from severe depression and insomnia, with an addiction to drugs. While going home after the concert, he sees Im-sol in her wheelchair, looking stranded on the bridge. He gets down from his car and offers her an umbrella. After realizing she's a fan, he makes small talk with her until her friend arrives to pick her up. Im-sol is in clouds after meeting with her favorite idol. That night, she put on the watch she had bought and fangirls over his photos. But later at night, she gets woken up by news notifications that Sun Jae had attempted to unalive himself. Initially, she's in denial and decides to visit the hospital where Sun Jae was receiving treatment. While speeding on her wheelchair, she bumps into a cyclist, and the wristwatch on her hands falls into a small river. The watch is an item formerly worn by Sun Jae. Im-sol had purchased the watch when it was sold on auction. Because it's an item that belonged to Sun Jae, Im-sol crawls into the river to retrieve it, but as soon as she picks it up, a giant billboard across the road confirms the tragic passing of Sun Jae. Im-sol breaks down in tears at the news. As she cries her eyes out, the watch on her hands malfunctions, and everything around her freezes. Suddenly, she's transported 10 years to the past. She finds herself in a high school classroom and notices that her legs are fine. Without thinking, she runs to find Sun Jae at his high school, where he's practicing for a swimming competition. She disregards the coaches and runs to give Sun Jae a tight hug. She breaks into tears in his arms and pours out reassuring words to him before screaming her love for him. But she's immediately dragged out by security and gets thrown out. During the process, she hurts herself and suddenly realizes that she wasn't dreaming. After some thoughts, she concludes that she had died in the other world and had been transported to this world. But a meeting with Sun Jae and a phone call from her mother makes her realize that she had been transported to the past. Im-sol is happy for the opportunity to travel to the past. She happily hugs her family and greets her classmates happily. While in class, she inspects the watch and concludes that it had given her the powers to travel back in time. When she's asked to solve an equation on the board, she makes up an excuse to leave and runs to watch Sun Jae practicing. As she daydreams from far, she perceives the smell of cigarettes and goes to trace it. She finds a bunch of students fighting a boy and jumps in to intervene. As she scolds them for smoking around athletes, another group of bullies show up, and Tae-sung grabs her hands to flee from the area. After escaping the bullies, Im-sol snatches the pack of cigarettes from Tae-sung and scolds him for smoking. When Tae-sung sights a teacher from afar, he runs away, leaving her to be discovered. The teacher tells Im-sol to kneel and punishes her for smoking in school. As she tries to explain herself, she sees Sunjae and tries to hide from him. But it's too late. Sunjae had noticed her. Seeing the pack of cigarettes in her hands, he's also convinced that she had tried to smoke in school. He scolds her before leaving. After serving her punishment, Im-sol meets Tae-sung again. Tae-sung is a student who works part-time as an underground artist. Im-sol, before time traveling, had a huge crush on Tae-sung and had given him a love letter the previous day. But she doesn't remember this. As she scolds Tae-sung for leaving her to be punished, a notorious girl approaches her and warns her to stay away from Tae-sung since she also has a crush on him. That night, Im-sol sends Sunjae a friend request, but he immediately rejects it. He even avoids her at the bus station the next day. When the bus stopped at a station, Im-sol didn't make it out on time, and Sunjae runs to stop the bus. When Im-sol thanked him for stopping the bus, he rejects her thanks and declared that he had wanted to get his umbrella from her. Sunjae's friend sees him talking to Im-sol and tells him that Im-sol had a crush on Tae-sung and had even given him a love letter. This upsets Sunjae. While walking to class, Im-sol sees a swimming competition bulletin and remembers an interview where Sunjae, the K-pop idol, revealed that he had gotten seriously injured while swimming and had to end his career. Immediately, she runs to Sunjae's school and warns him against participating in the competition. When she tries to explain the reason, time freezes, and Im-sol realizes that she can't reveal details of the future. She resolves to warn Sunjae through other means, and even goes as far as dressing up as a shaman to warn him. While returning home dressed as a shaman, she sees Tae-sung, who had gotten injured from a fight. Feeling pity for him, she decides to treat his wounds. But as she returns home with Tae-sung, Sunjae sights her in the shaman attire and realizes that he had been deceived by her. Im-sol chases him home and tries to explain, but realized that Sunjae was her next-door neighbor who had just moved in. One night, she sees Sunjae leaving his house and follows him to the school's swimming pool, but he catches her next to his swim pants. She tries to escape, but he chases her, and they mistakenly fall into a pool. Sunjae is creeped out by her behavior and lashes out at her for acting weirdly towards him. While walking home, Im-sol almost gets into a car accident, but Sunjae comes in time to save her. Turns out that Sunjae already had feelings for Im-sol. He had met her when he moved next door and had fallen in love with her smile. The day they met at the bus station, he had waited outside her house and had followed her closely from behind. After saving her from the accident, he reassures her by telling her he would be careful during the competition. On the D-Day, Im-sol cheers him from the crowd, and he ends up winning the competition without suffering an injury. When he gets home, he reveals his intention to confess to Im-sol, but his friend warns him that Im-sol feelings are not romantic and is only that of a fan. The next day, while on a date with Im-sol, Sunjae struggles to find the perfect timing to confess his feelings. Each time a moment presents itself, he immediately gets nervous and flunks his opportunity. While taking photos inside a photo booth, he almost confesses, but the moment doesn't seem right. As he escorts Im-sol to her house, his friend sprinkles snow around to create a moment for confession. But Sunjae still fails to make a confession which earns the mockery of his friend. One day while taking swimming lessons, Sunjae gets injured and is rushed to the hospital. The doctor reveals that he needs to undergo another surgery and years of rehabilitation to use his arms. While contemplating his future, he receives a call from his father. Sunjae's father had hosted a party to celebrate his son's gold medal at the competition. At the party, the father reveals that he had made plans for Sunjae to receive private swimming lessons from world-class coaches. Sunjae is heartbroken at the news and reveals his plans to quit swimming. The father requests for an explanation, but Sunjae refuses to answer as he's scared of being a disappointment to his father. Im-sol learns about Sunjae's injury and realizes that some events cannot be changed regardless of how hard she tries. She panics and breaks down in tears. The next day at school, Im-sol is hit by a ball and remembers that her house had caught fire on the same day, leaving a burnt scar on her mother's hand. With the help of Tae-sung, she arrives home on time to put out the fire and stop the tragedy from happening to her mother. Meanwhile, Sunjae's father learns about his son's injury and scolds him for hiding it. He schedules a surgery for Sunjae, and although the surgery is successful, the doctors announce that Sunjae may never be able to swim. Im-sol hears this from outside and breaks down to cry in the hospital ward. Sunjae walks in to see her crying but doesn't interrupt her. Im-sol doesn't visit during his recovery at the hospital, but frequently sends gifts to him. She even steals her grandmother's chicken soup to give to Sunjae's father. To show gratitude, the father offers her a huge bottle of homemade wine. Im-sol unknowingly drinks the entire bottle and gets drunk. From her room, she sights Sunjae going out and sneakily follows him to the swimming pool. Sunjae discovers her and realizes that she's drunk. She forces him to listen to music, and as they share sweet moments, Sunjae bends to kiss her and ends up confessing his feelings to the drunk Im-sol. Im-sol is hungover on the next day and doesn't remember the kiss and confession. As she walks to school, she plays a recording from the previous night. Before it gets to the part where Sunjae confessed his feelings, Tae-sung appears and asks her out in the presence of Sunjae, who had been behind her. Suddenly, the watch on her wrist stops, and she's transported back to the present at the same time when the news announced Sunjae's death. Seeing the situation, she realizes that nothing had changed. When she goes to attend Sunjae's burial, she's stopped by some detectives who reveal that Im-sol was the last person Sunjae had talked to before his death. They also show her a photo that was found on Sunjae's desk. It's the picture she'd taken with Sunjae when they went on a date. Im-sol quickly realizes that her travel to the past had some effect on the future, so she rushes back to the river to reenact the exact moment that led to the time slip. But nothing happens. While at home, Im-sol receives a call from Sunjae's friend, Baek in Hyuk, who tells her that Sunjae had always wanted to apologize to her. As she asks for an explanation, her watch lights up, and Im-sol realizes that the time slip only occurs at midnight. She immediately taps on the watch and is taken back to the past. 10 days had gone by since she was transported back to the future. During those times, the naive Im-sol of the past had accepted to become Tae-sung's girlfriend and had also severed all relationship with Sunjae. Im-sol tries to get back with Sunjae, but he's weirded out by her split personality. He questions her about her behavior lately, and she makes up an excuse of being possessed by a ghost. Sunjae doesn't buy her excuse and leaves. As she tries to follow him, she gets hurt, and Tae-sung appears to help her, much to the dismay of Sunjae. Tae-sung believes she has a split personality, but confesses that he's in love with her. That same day, Im-sol meets up with Baek in Hyuk and warns him to never introduce Sunjae to an audition. After, she goes to meet Sunjae but sees him getting bullied by some students. She runs in to intervene but is spotted by a teacher. As she flees from the teacher, she gets stopped by Ga-hyun, the notorious girl who's in love with Tae-sung. They begin fighting and pulling each other's hair, but is separated by a strange man. Im-sol recognizes the man as the agent who had gotten Sunjae to become a K-pop idol. She runs after the man, but sees him handing a business card to both Sunjae and In Hyuk. To stop Sunjae from auditioning, she sneaks into his room and tears the business card apart. But at this moment, she hears a sound, hides under Sunjae's bed, and falls unconscious. Sunjae is shocked to meet her in his room and seeks an explanation. She tells him that she had sneaked in to give him some motivational books. Sunjae wraps her up in a blanket and takes her out of his house. While outside, he tells her that he cannot be friends with her. The next day, after meeting up with Tae-sung, Im-sol learns that Sunjae had gone for an audition. She begins to panic and goes in search of Sunjae. But in reality, Sunjae was helping out his father at the store. When Sunjae learns that Im-sol had been searching for him, he goes out in search for her and finds her being stalked by an old man. He intervenes to save her, but she mistakenly falls into a river. She loses her phone and purse in this process. As Sunjae jumps into the river to save her, Im-sol recalls a memory. It was Sunjae who had rescued her in the accident that left her crippled. It also turns out that Sunjae had intentionally dialed her number at the radio station when he was an idol. Im-sol visits the police station for her lost item, but only her purse is found. As she returns home, she sees a crowd and goes to find what had happened. Turns out that a dead body had been found around the area. While standing with crowd, she hears a bell sound that triggers her memory. It was the same sound she had heard on the day of the accident that crippled her. Im-sol and Sunjae get back together as friends after the incident. Im-sol buys a time capsule and buries it together with Sunjae. She makes him promise to meet on the 1st of January 2023 to dig out the capsule together. While walking to school, Im-sol forgets her tie, but Sunjae gives her his tie and suffers punishment for it. One day while returning from the movies, Sunjae announces that he plans to apply for physical education at the university. Im-sol cheers his decision and promises to help him with studies. Meanwhile, In-hyuk is having problems with his bandmates. The lead vocalist keeps missing trainings, so In-hyuk recruits Sunjae as a replacement. Im-sol is shocked to see Sunjae singing and panics at her inability to change the future. So when Sunjae gifts her a new phone from the money made from a singing gig, she lashes out at him. Sunjae doesn't understand her reaction and angrily walks out on her. The next day, Im-sol is confronted again by Ga-hyun, who tells her that Tae-sung was only using her to avoid getting into a relationship with other girls. Im-sol meets up with Tae-sung and breaks up with him for good. While walking away, she puts on her earpiece and plays the recording of the night she had gotten drunk. As it gets to the part where Sunjae confesses his feelings, Sunjae suddenly appears and tells her to break up with Tae-sung. And at the same time, the recording plays the confession part. Im-sol is shocked to discover Sunjae's feelings for her and runs away, leaving him confused. Meanwhile, a weird man had picked up Im-sol's lost phone, and he tricks her grandma into revealing their home address. Im-sol's mother goes on a trip and tells Im-sol to take care of the house in her absence. With her mother gone, Im-sol goes to watch a baseball match at the stadium with Sunjae. As they celebrate the win of their favorite team, Sunjae drags her out and confesses his feelings for her. As he waits for her response, he's interrupted by a phone call from Tae-sung. Tae-sung had gotten into an accident, was taken to the hospital. There, he sees Im-sol's mother preparing to undergo a surgery and immediately calls to notify Im-sol. Her mother had hidden the truth from the family. The supposed trip was a lie. After her mother's surgery, Im-sol confesses to Sunjae that she cannot reciprocate his feelings. On the 1st of September, the day she got involved in an accident, Im-sol decides to stay indoors. She turns down all requests to go outside. But when Sunjae calls her to meet him at a playground, she decides to quickly meet him. While going to meet Sunjae, she's blocked by a taxi, and Im-sol immediately recognizes the driver as the same driver who had kidnapped and crippled her. Im-sol gets a flashback of the day of her accident in the past timeline. She had slept in the bus and had missed her stop. Sunjae was in the same bus with her and had intentionally stayed back to watch over her. But when they get to the final bus stop, he stands to wake her, but gets distracted for a moment. Im-sol wakes up at this moment and runs out of the bus. Before Sunjae could chase after her, the bus closes. Im-sol calls for a taxi, but gets suspicious of the driver after she finds weird tools at the back seat. She declines the taxi and waits for another, but the driver abducts her and drives her to his hideout. The driver leaves to get his tools, and Im-sol uses this opportunity to escape, but is chased down by the weird driver. Sunjae, who had been looking for Im-sol, sights her being chased by a car and runs to save her, but the weird driver speeds up and ends up hitting Im-sol, leaving her crippled. In the present timeline, the same driver abducts her again and leaves her umbrella on the roadside. So when Sunjae sees the umbrella, he gets suspicious and reports the case to the police. They don't take him seriously, and he leaves to find Im-sol by himself. Meanwhile, Im-sol wakes up at the back of the car and finds herself tied up. The weird driver had gone into his hideout. She struggles to free herself, but before escaping, she takes out his car keys to prevent him from chasing her with the car. The driver soon finds her missing and chases her with another car. Im-sol avoids using the main routes and runs through tracks, but the driver manages to track her down and drives at high speed to hit her. At this moment, another car intercepts the weird driver, and Im-sol is saved from the accident. Sunjae runs to check up on her, but the watch on her hand stops, and she's transported back to the future timeline. Im-sol finds herself in 2023, the present timeline. She had managed to change her fate and now works as an extra in a film production company. Feeling happy with how things turned out, she goes to Sunjae's house and admires the building from afar. At that same time, a stalker with white jacket tries to sneak into Sunjae's house, but is quickly discovered by the security. As they chase down the stalker, Im-sol bumps into the stalker and is mistaken to be the stalker due to her white jacket. She's taken to the police station, but Sunjae decides not to sue her to prevent reporters from getting news of the stalking incident. Im-sol gets home and learns that she's no longer a fan of Eclipse. She tries to find the watch, but to no avail. Since she had changed the future, the current Im-sol no longer had the chance to become a fan. When Sunjae's manager discovers that Im-sol works at a film production company, he rejects their offer to star Sunjae in their movie. The CEO of the film company learns of this and begs Im-sol to reconcile and convince Sunjae to take on the movie role. Im-sol sets a date to meet up with Sunjae, but a few minutes before the meeting, she receives a call from her best friend who's in labor. As she runs to leave the venue, she bumps into Sunjae and throws him into a pool of water. Due to the urgency of the matter with her best friend, she doesn't turn to see the man she had bumped into. She leaves a card with the manager and runs to the hospital. At the hospital, she's shocked to discover that her best friend had ended up marrying her brother, and they were having their second child. Meanwhile, Sunjae is angry and requests compensation for his soaked clothes. He sends a message to Im-sol requesting payment, but she's shocked at the price of the clothes and requests to see photos of the clothes. Sunjae decides to let the matter go, but when he finds a leaked photo of himself in the news, he files a lawsuit against her and puts a restraining order on her. Im-sol is unhappy with the lawsuit and decides to explain herself to Sunjae. She learns about his concert and goes to the venue with the intention to meet him. But the staff at the venue refuses her entry due to her inability to present a ticket. Determined to speak to Sunjae, Im-sol begs his manager to give a bouquet of flowers with her name card to Sunjae. But Sunjae gets on stage before the manager could present the bouquet. Im-sol enjoys the concert from outside, but while leaving, she bumps into a stranger and her phone falls down, leaving a crack. This is similar to the night she learned about Sunjae's death. Afraid that fate would repeat itself, Im-sol runs to the bridge and waits for Sunjae to honor the promise they had made to meet each other. After the concert, Sunjae sees the bouquet and name card. Sunjae had honored his promise and had gone to dig up the time capsule. When Im-sol doesn't show up, he digs it out alone and sees a watch with a letter thanking him for being alive. This makes him daydream about the day they reunite again. So when he sees the name card, he immediately leaves to meet Im-sol at the bridge. They both reunite again and are happy to see each other. As they catch up on old times, Sunjae's manager interrupts them and invites Sunjae to an after-party. Im-sol gets worried of fate repeating itself, and at the last moment, she stops Sunjae from leaving and expresses her desire to spend the night with him. Sunjae is stunned at her request, and he stutters when responding, which leaves his manager shocked. He tells his manager to make up an excuse to not attend the group's after-party, and he leaves with Seol in a car. While in the car, Im-sol asks about his well-being, and he tells her he's fine. Im-sol is happy and satisfied with the future she had changed. They drive to a hotel, and Im-sol begins to panic. She doesn't want Sunjae to misunderstand her intention for seeking a private time with him. But she's immediately relieved after Sunjae takes her to a lounge bar. As they drink and talk about their lives, Sunjae brings up the topic of the time capsule and denies going in search for it. A phone call from In-hyuk interrupts their discussion. In-hyuk tells him to be careful of reporters and also reveals that there are rumors of him taking a girl to an hotel. To escape from reporters and Saesang fans, Im-sol covers herself and uses an umbrella to prevent Sun-jae from being captured by paparazzis. While driving out of the hotel, Im-sol reveals that she needs to use the bathroom, and Sun-jae offers to drive her to his place. In-hyuk had left an embarrassing game statue in Sun-jae's house. So, when Sun-jae sees the item at his house, he rushes to hide it while Im-sol uses the bathroom. After hiding the statue in his room, he goes to check up on Im-sol, but overhears her conversation with her mother, where she talks about spending the night at his place. Sun-jae is elated at the news. He prepares dinner for her and questions her on her reasons for meeting up with him. Im-sol reveals that she had a dream where he unalived himself due to depression. Sun-jae reassures her that he would never unalive himself. As she stands to wash her dishes, it spills on her, and Sun-jae takes her into his room to change up. He immediately remembers the time capsule and statue in his room. As he struggles to hide them, Im-sol walks in and discovers the statue. She tries to take a good look at the statue, but they end up falling on each other, which leads to a romantic moment. But this moment is interrupted when In-hyuk walks into the house. In-hyuk is drunk and has problems recognizing Im-sol. So Sun-jae uses the opportunity to hide Im-sol in his wardrobe. In-hyuk enters into the room and drunkenly scolds Sun-jae for having feelings for Im-sol. Sun-jae still has feelings for Im-sol after all the years. Even after they parted, he had a hard time getting over her. Im-sol had kept her distance from him after the incident with the weird driver, and they grew up apart from each other. Sun-jae finally drives In-hyuk away, but as he steps into the room, he sees Im-sol with the time capsule. During the ride to Im-sol's house, Sun-jae reveals his long-time feelings for her. When they get to the house, Im-sol also reveals her feelings for him before leaving. Sun-jae takes some time to process her confession. Immediately he understands her words, he runs after her, and they share a passionate kiss in her room. After sharing sweet moments together, he leaves her house while cosplaying as her brother in order not to draw suspicions. But as he drives off, he fails to notice that the weird driver from years ago had been stalking him. Sun-jae and Im-sol plan to meet up the next day. But after work, she realizes that she had forgotten her car at Sun-jae's place. She goes over to his place and gives him a call, but Sun-jae is in the shower, so he doesn't pick up her call. As she finds her car in the parking lot, she notices a suspicious man from afar, but he turns out to be a security. She then bumps into Sun-jae's stalker and chases after her. Meanwhile, Sun-jae is out of the shower and dials back Im-sol's number, but she's busy chasing the stalker and doesn't respond. He receives a call from his bandmate who asks him about his room number. At the same time, Sun-jae hears a knock at the door and assumes it to be the bandmate. Im-sol chases down the stalker and takes her to a restaurant. The stalker is revealed to be a homeless 14-year-old girl who stalks Sun-jae due to her love for him. As Im-sol scolds the girl for acting weird, she hears a shocking news. Sun-jae had been attacked at his home by a weird man and had suffered grave injuries. The suspect is revealed to be Kim Young-soo. He had sneaked into the hotel and stabbed Sun-jae. Im-sol rushes to the hospital in a state of despair. When she sees Sun-jae's father crying, she gets struck with the idea to travel back in time again. Since she can't find the watch on auction online, she rushes over to Sun-jae's house in search of the watch, but finds nothing. She meets In-hyuk, and he blames her for all the bad luck in Sun-jae's life. When she asks him about the watch, he tells her that Sun-jae had misplaced it. Im-sol returns to her family home and learns from the news that Young-soo had been arrested for a crime in 2009. She asks her mother about the details, and her mother reveals that Sun-jae had saved her from a kidnapping attempt ostracized by Young-soo. Im-sol meets up with the detective in charge of the kidnapping case to find out more details. The detective gives her a witness report. According to the report, Sun-jae was on his way home when he found books that belonged to Im-sol on the floor. Hearing screams, he runs towards the direction and finds Im-sol being chased by Young-soo. He runs after Young-soo and The two engage in a fight. Sunjae is greatly injured in the fight and manages to delay Young-soo until the arrival of the police. Young-soo was arrested and served prison time, but now he's free and seeks to get revenge on Sunjae. Im-sol is devastated at this discovery. She resolves to travel back in time, so she searches every nook and cranny of her room. She eventually finds her grandmother with the watch, but before traveling to the past, she goes to the hospital to visit Sunjae and promises to change his fate. As she clicks on the watch, she finds her on the back of a huge horse statue. The Im-sol of the timeline had been drunk and was making a fuss at her college. Im-sol jumps down, but mistakenly falls into Sunjae's arm. Embarrassed, she runs away without leaving a word. Im-sol is now in college, and Sunjae attends the same college as her. Im-sol meets up with her best friend, who gives her a bag to hold onto, telling her to bring it with her the next day. After the meeting with her friend, Im-sol rushes over to the police station and gives a statement to the officer. She tells them in detail about her kidnapping case in 2008 and pleads with them to catch the culprit before he commits another crime. She also claims that her memory was foggy, hence the delay in giving a statement. On her way back, she sees two people in the alley and interprets it as a bullying situation. She runs in to intervene and discovers that one of them is Tae-sung. Tae-sung was actually offering help to the other person. Once Im-sol realizes the actual situation, she decides to have a drink with Tae-sung. He tells her that he's now a graduate and owns a clothing brand. While leaving, he picks up the wrong bag, and Im-sol ends up with a bag containing Tae-sung's father's underwear. Meanwhile, Sunjae recounts Im-sol's weird behavior to In-hyuk. Previously, she would avoid him, but after jumping down from the horse statue, she had acted strangely. In-hyuk advises him to get over his feelings for Im-sol, and also reminds that Im-sol hates him now. In-hyuk proceeds to tease him about the song he had written for Im-sol. A few days later, Im-sol is woken up by her best friend, who tells her to prepare for a college trip. Im-sol is reluctant, but gets motivated by her friend to join the trip. Coincidentally, Sunjae is also on the bus. Few minutes into the journey, a boy begins to narrate a myth. If two people kiss on the bus, they'll end up getting married in the future. Im-sol doesn't care about the myth, but spends her time trying to avoid Sunjae in the bus. Her efforts are fruitless. Each time she tries to avoid Sunjae, they always end up together. After losing a drinking game, she's made to dance in front of everyone. But she runs away as soon as she sights Sunjae. Im-sol runs into a forest. When she realizes her environment, she tries to escape but accidentally hits Sunjae with a weapon. As she helps him to his foot, she gets caught in a trap. Sunjae ends up helping her. He eventually asks her the reason for her behavior towards him, but she doesn't reply. Later that night, Im-sol gets drunk, and Sunjae silently follows to take care of her. When she falls asleep and almost hurt herself, Sunjae jumps in to save her. Seeing his kind gestures, Im-sol breaks down in tears and tells him to stop caring for her. He takes her home on his back. But while on the way, Im-sol sings the song he wrote for her, and he wonders how she knew about the song. When he asks her about it, she drunkenly reveals that she is from the future and has come to sort out some things. While getting her to position on his back, they kiss mistakenly. Meanwhile, the police fail to catch Young-soo. He had somehow gotten wind of the police investigation and had set his hideout on fire to destroy clues. Sunjae confronts Im-sol about time traveling, and she explains that his watch had something to do with it. Although she can't explain why, she concludes that it was because Sunjae had once saved her. When Sunjae asks her about her reason for traveling back, she refuses to answer and apologizes for the way she had treated him. Sunjae eventually reveals his plan to travel to the US. Although Im-sol is shocked, she thinks it's for the better. Baek In-hyuk gets an opportunity to feature his band in a reality show with the condition that Sunjae joins them. He tries to convince Sunjae, but hears the news that Sunjae is traveling to the US for rehabilitation. Im-sol meets up with the detective and he tells her of their failed plan to capture young Soo. However, they had found some new evidence, and Imsol also gives him more details of the kidnapper. A new girl is flirting with Sunjae. Imsol notices this in class, but acts normal about it. When she goes to drink at a bar with her best friend, she notices Sunjae with the new girl. However, she falls asleep in the bar and wakes up with no one around her. As she tries to leave, her purse falls down, and her money scatters everywhere in the bar. Imsol crawls from table to pick up her coins, and accidentally crawls under Sunjae's table. From underneath, she sees the new girl leaning in to kiss Sunjae and misinterprets the situation. At the same moment, her phone rings under the table. To avoid being discovered, she covers her head with a bucket and runs out of the bar. Later that night, Imsol drinks with her brother on the rooftop. She feels betrayed by the kissing incident. In an outburst, she flings away her slippers and they end up landing in front of Sunjae. Imsol goes downstairs to meet Sunjae. He asks her if she's jealous, and she firmly denies it. Meanwhile, Tae-sung visits his detective father at the station and overhears the kidnapping incident involving Imsol. He's worried. Baek In-hyuk is determined to get Sunjae in the band. He shaves off his hair to show his seriousness, but Sunjae agrees to join the band before seeing the shaved hair. Tae-sung meets up with Imsol at the college and offers her a bouquet with a gift bag. Sunjae stumbles upon this scene and imagines a scenario. Imsol gets back together with Tae-sung. Imsol pulls Tae-sung for a drink at a restaurant. Tae-sung advises her to be careful and returns the bag they had accidentally swapped. Imsol begs him for a favor. She asks him to remind his detective father to protect Sunjae in 2023. Tae-sung is confused at the request, but eventually agrees to the favor. Before leaving, Imsol gets an emergency call from her mother. She arrives home with Tae-sung to find a flood in her house. Sunjae is surprisingly there to help. Tae-sung also offers to help, but gets into a fight with Sunjae. They're nearly electrocuted by a bare wire, but Imsol arrives in time to turn off the electricity. After fixing the wires, Imsol's mother suggests for Tae-sung to sleep over, but Sunjae doesn't like the idea and offers his place to Tae-sung. While in Sunjae's house, Tae-sung sees a plane ticket and questions Sunjae about it. As they make small talks, Tae-sung reveals that Imsol had asked for Sunjae to be protected in the year 2023. When Sunjae probes for more information, Tae-sung doesn't reply. Few days later, In-hyuk and the bandmate go for the audition, but Sunjae doesn't turn up because his flight had been scheduled for that day. When Imsol hears about this, she runs to the airport. She watches the plane take off from afar and breaks down in tears. Meanwhile, the audition is successful. Baek In-hyuk thanks Sunjae on air for the song that led to their success. As Imsol returns home from the airport, she sees a truck and mistakes it to be young Soo. As she runs away, she bumps into Sunjae and is shocked to see him. Sunjae had missed his flights. He had gone to dig up the time capsule and learns a bit of the future from Imsol's letter. He hugs Imsol and reassures her that he doesn't mind dying in the future for her. Imsol eventually admits her feelings for him, and they end up sharing a passionate kiss. Imsol's mother witnesses this scene from behind and assumes that Sunjae had gotten a girlfriend. She doesn't know that the girl being kissed is her daughter. Although they reconcile and get together, Imsol still worries about Sunjae's future. She calls the police and informs them about the truck she had seen the previous night. Sunjae returns home and his father is shocked to see him. Sunjae ends up confessing that he longer wishes to pursue a swimming career and only wants to focus on his studies. Meanwhile, Imsol's mother narrates seeing Sunjae kissing a girl to the grandmother. Imsol walks in on the conversation and defends Sunjae. But her mother isn't convinced. She meets Sunjae's father and tells him about the incident. But the father doesn't believe her and tells her that his son has no intentions of dating. Imsol and Sunjae spend happy moments together. But Imsol is worried about being discovered as it could cause problems for Sunjae's future career. Sunjae reassures her and expresses his desire to spend time with her before she leaves for the future. One day after meeting up with a friend, Sunjae accidentally picks up a bag of condoms. He goes to meet Imsol, and they spend the night in each other's arms. Im-sol wakes up to find drool on Sunjae's shirt. As she cleans it up, she's discovered by her brother, who misunderstands the whole situation. A fight ensues, and both families get seated for a meeting. Both families argue and get into a fight. As Sunjae's father tries to drag Sunjae away, he mistakenly pulls the bag, and the 100 packets of condoms fly out. Everyone is shocked into silence, including Sunjae. But Sunjae quickly explains the situation and even calls the real owner of the bag in order to convince the family. The police look into the truck reported by Im-sol and are able to get a lead on Young-soo. Tae-sung also finds out about this and warns Im-sol to be careful. Im-sol wishes to keep this a secret from Sunjae, and so she persuades Tae-sung to not tell him in exchange for a meal. Sunjae overhears the meal conversation and announces to Tae-sung that he's now dating Im-sol. The police call Im-sol and inform her that Young-soo has been arrested. She feels relieved. She's invited to a small performance by In-hyuk's band. There, Im-sol sees Sunjae singing and tears up. She later reveals news of Young-soo's arrest to Sunjae, and they get happy. But their happiness is short-lived when they find out that Young-soo had escaped from the police after an accident occurred with the car transporting him to the station. Im-sol meets up with the detective, and they decide on a plan to lure out Young-soo. They plan on using Im-sol as bait. Sunjae overhears this conversation and decides to protect Im-sol from any harm. He makes sure her house is safe from intruders and even changes the battery on her electric weapon. When Im-sol gets suspicious of his behavior, he makes up a lie. Meanwhile, In-hyuk had failed the last round of an audition due to an illness. Sunjae and Im-sol discover this and plan to visit In-hyuk in his hometown. Tae-sung offers his beloved car for the journey, and they leaves immediately to the countryside. Sunjae's father is unaware of this trip and mistakenly locks himself in a bathroom. He calls out for Sunjae, but no one answers. He then seeks for help by shouting out of the toilet window, but no one hears him due to the sound of a construction nearby. Im-sol's mother hears his shout for help the next day and runs in to rescue him. The trio arrive at the countryside and sights In-hyuk walking into the ocean. They misunderstand this and run into the ocean to prevent him from drowning himself. As In-hyuk explains that he wasn't suicidal, they turn to see Tae-sung's car being swept away by the ocean. With no car for the return trip, the trio decides to spend the night in In-hyuk's parents' house. Meanwhile, the escaped Young-soo visits Im-sol's mother shop to snoop around for Im-sol. At the same time, Im-sol calls her mother and informs her about the trip to In-hyuk's hometown. Young-soo overhears the conversation and gets the address to where Im-sol was staying. In-hyuk employs the help of his friends to find a missing pet goat. Afterwards, they enjoy happy moments playing by the ocean. Sunjae decides to help In-hyuk with the band, and Tae-sung confesses his romantic feelings to Im-sol. He knows about Im-sol's love for Sunjae, but still decides to let out his feelings. Meanwhile, Sunjae has a filming schedule at the amusement park, but it gets postponed. While in the park, he's haunted with strange feelings. The park feels familiar to him, as if he had shared happy moments with someone at the park. While looking around, he sees Im-sol and follows her into a ferry wheel. The door closes and starts moving, trapping Im-sol with Sunjae. With just the two of them, Sunjae questions her on her decision to quit the job. Im-sol reveals that she can't with him no matter what. Sunjae then talks about the script. He asks her why she had decided on a sad ending, but Im-sol counters him saying it was actually a happy ending, since the main character got to live. Sunjae doesn't share the same opinion. He tells her that main character ended up living a sad life. The man loses memories of his love, and the woman gets to suffer in silence. He also tells her about his strange dreams and its similarities to her script. Im-sol becomes emotional due to his words, but insists that she can't accept him for the role, and that he would die if they worked together. The Ferris wheel suddenly stops, and Sunjae reaches out to grab Im-sol to prevent her from falling. After some time, Im-sol falls asleep in the Ferris wheel. When Sunjae discovers that she has a fever, He carries her out with many people videoing him. He takes her to his place and makes her sleep in his room. While sleeping, she mumbles out his name, which makes Sunjae curious. The next morning, Im-sol wakes up to find herself on Sunjae's bed. As she rushes to leave, Sunjae stops her and convinces her to eat breakfast before leaving. Meanwhile, Tae-sung gets a lead on Young-soo. They find out that Sunjae's dashcam must have recorded Young-soo plate number. Tae-sung goes to visit Sunjae but gets shocked to Im-sol at the place. Im-sol makes up an excuse and tells Tae-sung that she had come to discuss movie scripts with Sunjae. After questioning Sunjae about the dashcam, Tae-sung leaves with Im-sol. Sunjae finds Im-sol's medicine at his place. When his manager volunteers to return the medicines, Sunjae turns him down and decides to do it himself. He visits Im-sol's home, but finds her talking a scroll with her nephew in the playground. He gets flustered and immediately hides from her. But his phone rings and he gets discovered. After telling her his reasons for visiting, he tries to spend more time with her by playing with the baby. But the baby vomits on him. She takes him to her house for a change of clothes, but no one is around. Her family had gone to a bathhouse where they found Sunjae's father. After they discover they were neighbors, Im-sol's mother tries to set up a date for Im-sol with Sunjae. But Sunjae's father turns down the proposal and announces that his son is too good for Im-sol. Im-sol's family returns and she immediately panics. She rushes to hide Sunjae in her bedroom. While in her room, he sees the time capsule watch. As he inspects it, Im-sol walks in and tries to snatch it away. The watch falls down in the process and gets damaged. Sunjae volunteers to repair it against her will. While leaving his house, he recounts memories of him kissing Im-sol in front of her door. He searches on the internet for an answer, but finds nothing. In-hyuk concludes that Sunjae has a crush on Im-sol. Tae-sung meets up with Sunjae again and requests to see the dashcam. Sunjae agrees. The conversation shifts to Im-sol. Tae-sung talks about his friendship with Im-sol, and Sunjae gets upset at this. Im-sol goes back to work and pleads to be accepted again. Sunjae agrees to star in the movie, but on the condition that she changes the ending of her script. Im-sol rejects this condition and says that the female character in script had gone through a lot already. Im-sol realizes that her phone was missing and goes in search for it with Sunjae. She trips on a hill and falls, making her recount some strange events and memories. She doesn't tell Sunjae about this as a way to protect him. Upon their return to the house, they find no one around and end up sharing a sweet night in each other's arms. The next day, they prepare to go home. As they get into a train, Im-sol suddenly begins to act strange. She pretends to not recognize Sunjae, making him think that her soul had returned to the future timeline. Im-sol stops the train and gets off alone. She had a memory where Young-soo had attacked her in the hometown. She had come up with the pretense to prevent Sunjae from dying while trying to protect her. She also remembers that Young-soo would attack her in the evening on the 6th of May, so she teams up with the police to catch him. Sunjae arrives home but doesn't find Im-sol at her house. After asking her mother, they find out that she's missing. He immediately panics when he discovers that Im-sol never got on another train and was still in the countryside. Sunjae rushes back to the countryside and involves the local police. When Young-soo sees the local police approaching Im-sol, he backs down, but unfortunately bumps into Sunjae. Sunjae chases him into a forest, and they fight off each other. Young-soo pulls out a knife and stabs Sunjae. As he tries to stab again, the police arrive at the scene and detain him. Meanwhile, the stabbed Sunjae stumbles on his feet and falls off a cliff. Realizing that Sunjae would die from the fall, Im-sol immediately clicks on her watch and gets transported to the first day that Sunjae had met her. She avoids meeting him to prevent him from falling in love with her. The future changes. Im-sol now works in a film production company and sometimes acts as a manager to celebrities. One day, a celebrity gets drunk and tries to drive. Im-sol stops him just in time, but gets arrested by the police for harassing a celebrity. Her boss forces her to write an apology letter without listening to her side of the story. Im-sol runs into Tae-sung, and while catching up on old times, she discovers that he now works as a police officer. They go for a drink and Im-sol ends up drunk. On their way back, she sees the snow and breaks down in tears at the thought of Sunjae. The next day, her boss finds out the true details of the incident and thanks her for preventing a drunk driving incident. As compensation, the boss gives her an opportunity to work on a movie project. While handing over a file to her boss, Im-sol mistakenly slips in a red envelope together with the file. The boss sees the envelope and thinks it's an appreciation letter from Im-sol. Later in the day, Im-sol remembers that the red envelope contains a letter she had written to the boss while drunk. She had cursed out at the boss and expressed intentions to quit. She decides to steal the envelope, but her boss is at an award show with top celebrities. She eventually succeeds in stealing the letter, but while escaping, she bumps into a man. The man reaches out to hold and prevents her from falling down the stairs. This man turns out to be Sunjae. Sunjae had seen her trying to steal the red envelope from her boss and mistakes her for a thief at the award show. While chasing her, he bumps into her, but manages to prevent her from falling. Im-sol tries to explain the situation, but Sunjae doesn't believe her, so they get into an argument. Sunjae had an envelope similar to Im-sol's envelope. While arguing, the envelope falls, and Sunjae ends up picking up the wrong envelope. Sunjae is called to present an award on stage. When he opens the envelope to call out the winner's name, he's shocked to see Im-sol's letter. This leads to an embarrassing moment that goes viral. Im-sol and her best friend Hyun-ju works at the same company. While in a meeting, they make suggestions on who to cast in a role, and the boss suggests casting Sunjae. Everyone agrees with the decision, but Im-sol is against it. Hyun-ju is made to send the script to Sunjae, but she mistakenly sends a movie script written by Im-sol. Sunjae receives the wrong script and reads it. The script is about a woman who travels back in time to save the love of her life. Sunjae is touched by the movie script and decides to take on a role in the movie. But his friends notifies him that a mistake was made with the script. Meanwhile, Sunjae's Saesang fan is being stalked by Young-soo. When he tries to kidnap her, she manages to escape, and he also escapes from the police, trying to catch him. Tae-sung is in charge of the case and is dedicated to catching Young-soo. Im-sol's boss set up a meeting with Sunjae. When Sunjae realizes that the script belongs to Im-sol, he decides to turn down the offer. But Im-sol beats him to it. She rejects the idea of starring Sunjae in her script, which greatly annoys Sunjae. He waits outside her workplace and offers to take her out to a restaurant. At the restaurant, he asks her reasons for rejecting him for the role, and she tells him that a shaman had advised her to not work with actors born in the year of the horse. Sunjae initially doubts her, and when he finds out she intends to cast another actor born in the year of the horse, he gets angry. He attempts to convince in many ways, but she rejects him each time. Sunjae suffers from weird dreams. He constantly dreams about living multiple past lives. However, he doesn't take the dreams seriously. Meanwhile, Sunjae's father sees Im-sol's grandmother in his restaurant, and they make small talks with each another. Sunjae walks in on them, and the grandmother, who suffers from dementia, mistakes Sunjae for her dead husband. As she scolds Sunjae for leaving her, the father finds a paper with a number written on it. On the back of the paper is a photo of Im-sol and her grandmother. Sunjae immediately recognizes Im-sol in the picture and offers to drive the grandmother home. Im-sol sees Sunjae dropping off her grandmother and confronts him about it. She's scolded for not showing appreciation and is made to buy coffee for Sunjae. At the coffee store, he tries to convince her to cast him in the script, but she refuses. He tries to boast of his popularity, but gets embarrassed when a group of teenagers fail to recognize him as an actor. Im-sol laughs at this embarrassing moment, and right at that moment, Sunjae is captivated by her smile. The next day, the boss insists on casting Sunjae in the movie. Im-sol gets angry, decides to quit the job, and lashes out at her best friend for making the mistake of sending the wrong script to Sunjae. She leaves angrily and goes to an amusement park. During one of her time travels, She had celebrated Sunjae's birthday at this amusement park. She gets emotional thinking about the past. After the script meeting, Sunjae decides to confess his feelings to Imsol. But she immediately rejects his confession and tells him that she's already in love with someone else. Tae-sung picks her up in his car. He also mentions his feelings to her. But she calmly turns him down and wishes for them to be just friends. Sunjae learns about Imsol's decision to quit her job and goes to meet her, as he picks up the time capsule watch from repairs and suddenly gets some strange memories. Meanwhile, the dashcam from Sunjae's car helps Tae-sung to find Young-soo. They track down Young-soo and finds him in a car. Tae-sung requests for Young-soo to step down, but Young-soo speeds off. Tae-sung gets into his car and pursues Young-soo. At the same time, Sunjae is hit with a wave of memories while in the middle of the road. This gives him a severe headache. Young-soo sights Sunjae in the middle of the road and drives with speed to hit him. But Tae-sung intercepts with his car and stops the accident. Sunjae gets unconscious from the headache and suddenly remembers all the memories he had with Imsol during her time travel. Although Tae-sung is injured from Collide, he catches Young-soo and tries to arrest him. Young-soo escapes from his grip and attempts to run away, but gets hit by a truck. He falls into a river and dies instantly. Imsol, while returning from somewhere in a taxi, hears the news of Young-soo's death. Worried, she browsed the internet and discovers that Sunjae had been rushed to the hospital. Seeing the traffic, she gets down from the taxi and runs on foot to the hospital. Sunjae wakes up with the memories of his past life and dashes out of the hospital to find Imsol. He finds Imsol at the hospital and they share a tight hug. Sunjae reveals that he now remembers their past life. Imsol is shocked but is happy to finally reunite with Sunjae. This becomes the start of their happy life. They meet up regularly for dates, and Imsol gets worried about being discovered by paparazzis. But Sunjae doesn't care about this. Sunjae and Imsol meets up Tae-sung. Tae-sung learns about their relationship and wishes them the best. Sunjae thanks him for tracking down Young-soo. Sunjae tells his In-hyuk about his plans to marry Imsol. In-hyuk is shocked, but shows support for their love. Their relationship is also revealed to their families. Sunjae's father is unsupportive, but later comes around when he sees how happy his son is with Imsol. Sunjae plans to propose to Imsol with fireworks, but stops when Imsol tells him that she wishes to pursue a career as a movie director. Sunjae agrees to support her, and she eventually achieves her dream. Years later, he proposes to her in a romantic setting and she accepts him. They eventually get married. Imsol's grandmother is seen throwing away the watch after Imsol achieves happiness.